So is it just like a lot of documents? On the big ones. It's like
Hi there. I'm Nicole with the PPD this So I was like, right. Exactly. You're like, oh, yeah.
Kate's civic leader, new civic team, and Sam was behind the scenes active in KQED. It goes, she just walked in with the red shoes, nice KQED. Yep.
There's information in your handouts, which you should have grabbed on your way in, related to each of these stations, and then there's a survey at the end that will fill out when we're wrapping up the discussion at every single table. What I'll do is keep time. We want to make sure that we're able to hear from all of the facilitators At each table, you'll see 1 or 2 facilitators, which are members of EPDA staff, who will be walking you through some of the content in your handouts. And you'll see a couple of note takers. We want to make sure everything that's being said today is kind of going back into our idea deck and is being sort of reflected in the work that we do to refine some of these recommendations. So folks with laptops will just be kind of trying to capture our comments. We do have a member of the press, and so I just wanted to know what him to say a quick hello and introduce himself.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Pekatowski. I'm born and raised, lived in South Boston all my life. Part of our South Boston Beat is for a community advocacy group, and it's part of the dissemination, part of our modus operandi is to bring attention to events and ongoings in the community. We do it by a lot of live streaming and recording of community events and development events. So right now the recording is going to YouTube, South Boston Beat, and it will be there for everyone to see and view. So the questions that are phrased or whatnot and answered will be there for posterity. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to just note that there will be members of staff photographing the event, and so if that was something you're okay with, please let us know. We'll make sure not to use your pictures in any of our social media or publications. But with that, going over to Cristiano, we'll go through the content for table 1, and I'm keeping time at 20 minutes when we want to do. So good luck and enjoy.
Well, thanks all for being here. So as before mentioned, my name is Cristiano. I work at the EPA. And to kick us off, I'd like to go around and do quick intros. So please share your name, which neighborhood you live in, and then if you have or have not been a part of the impact advisory group for ING in the past. And thank you for taking notes.
Both of my fingers are very quick. I'm Jerry Craig. Live actually in a new store, and this is my first meeting.
Cool. Awesome. So you're not just part of the impact advisory group. Awesome. Well, welcome.
Yeah, Craig DeBoer, I live right across the street. Not a long term South View, but I've been here 5 years. Concerned about what's happening in the neighborhood. I attended a few online butters meetings, things, but really don't know
I'm Leanna. I live at a place called Rockville. So I'm going to a lot of Rockville experience streets and things, but I haven't been to
That's cool. And you have a part of the impact advisory group in the past.
I'm Ann Sanders. I live on West Fifth Street in Hartford here. I am currently a member of the Community Advisory Council. It's the last seat.
Yes, it is.
And this is my first time being on this.
My name is Kate Gutierrez. I live on East First Street, and I have been part of ING for the last since 2002.
I'm Taylor.
My name is James from the Kennedy's in Carver.
Great. Well, to kick us off, I'm just going to quickly orient everybody else in these packets, and then we'll get into the idea itself. So, second page, you have a table of contents. If you're not sure which page to go to, this is a visual resource. We next have our executive summary that lays out where we're doing our process and where we're going next. So, definitely encourage you to read this after the conversation today. We're going to start here at station 1 on page 5. We're talking about one of our ideas, how we can move the effective engagement. So, for those who haven't heard of ING in the past, this is a way in short how we update our INGs. For those who haven't, then excellent. You just get to get an idea and see if this is the right way to do it. So, one of the reasons we want to sort of update the way we have an advisory is that we have community members who advise on development projects have a couple different ideas. We've heard from many conversations, months of engagement we've done so far. So in this conversation, I really want to hear from you all. Are we going in the right direction? Do you have any questions or things we can be more clear on? And especially, we're trying to, if this looks like the right idea, we want to get to the next level of detail so we can think about how do we actually operationalize this? So how do we make this into a reality? So I'm going to start on the first page in this little section of the process. So one of the things that we've heard in the past is that one of the reasons that IAGs are not especially represented is because it takes a lot of time and there's a lot of barriers to taking part in it. So one of the things we're trying to do is decrease the number of barriers for participation. So we will provide training about plan development so that folks who haven't been part of this process in the past still feel comfortable and confident in taking part and feeling that they have important things to share, which they do, but sometimes having the words and sort of the context of it. We also will be providing food and childcare and a stipend to urban members, community members who take part in this, again acknowledging you giving us your time to weigh in and share this different projects. And so we want to make sure that we're providing a thank you and acknowledgement of that time and effort. Next, currently, if you sign up for an IAG, you don't know when the meeting is going to take place or for how long you might be part of this group. And so what we're going to propose here is that we want to set terms to know how long you're going to be part of this group and have a regular meeting schedule so that you know months at a time of what day this meeting is going to take place so that you can prepare and not be caught up and not be able to attend. And lastly, we want to make sure that we're the groups that everyone's clear on how we are. And then there's four measures, including conflict of interest, check, so that we're making sure we're all here and good faith together. So that's sort of like some of the things that we're trying to do. I'm next going to go to and what's something they do. But again, feel free to jump in at any point if you have questions to clarify or if this sounds like we're going in the right direction. Yes.
And is that advisory group versus community advisory group?
That's a good point. So let's actually flip to do that. Thank you for that. Let's move to page 6. So at the bottom here, this blue chart, we do a comparison of what does an IAG impact advisory group do today and how those changes with this new leader in the advisory team. So the scope of the work currently an impact advisory group only reviews one project at a time. As part of our updating this process, we really want to make sure we have more planning and management. So if we want to get there, we're proposing that we review a group of projects in a given area all at one time, so we can sort of community members have a better sense of how these things are connected. When we think about mitigation, when we think about benefits, when we think about how they connect and the timing of when they go to construction, that we're sort of seeing them as a whole package, which they are. So that's one of our operational changes. I already sort of mentioned this, but currently there's no trainings for IAG members when proposing that. We sort of added training for folks. There are currently project managers, which are BPA staff members who help shepherd projects through the BPA process. Managing an IAG is just one part of their role, which means that there's a lot of inconsistencies across the IAGs. Sometimes the PM, project managers and PMs are really adept at having great facilitated conversations. Sometimes it's not one of their main skills. And so what we're proposing is that there are actually dedicated staff who facilitates these conversations, who helps recruit and bring more people into these community advisory teams, as well as because there's one group who's managing all of them, we can see how they all connect and maybe where we need to change the balance of where the advisory team does or does not do this work. And then lastly, I would also already mentioned this one, but currently there's not a clear, unclear role, inconsistent meeting expectations of roles for IAGs. We're hoping to have more clarity around that.
So question, is there a difference between IAG and CAC? Or is it just
So a CAC is sort of like the first round of an ING. So before INGs were around, CACs were in place. And then during the COVID, we put into place this other term called INGs, where this would be this would community members who were better determine where is information flows from. And as we found, INGs were a great particular one. So this is sort of our third attempt at making sure we're a little better. We try to take self-learning to the CACs and go more into this.
So it's just a matter of money.
There are also evolutions in the same. How do we have community members that find the same So this is one. So I'm thinking this is the survey questions for participation. This is actually one of the questions we would love to answer or help us answer. There could be benefits of taking a shorter term. It's easier for people if it's that long of time. However, is something lost or we don't have that much time to sort of get into the details of the work itself. So, I don't know. We'd love to hear your thoughts because I think there's a lot of trade-offs in that.
For the community advisory team, how is BBDA thinking of setting up? Is it going across different neighborhoods or is it going to be more neighborhood specific?
So this is also something we're trying to think about. So we don't have the exact answer yet. We've heard a couple different ways you could organize this community advisory teams. So one is based on geography and neighborhood projects. So having sort of maybe South Boston, I don't know, something around this area, kind of a neighborhood project or team, depending on the number of projects that will be coming. We obviously don't know every single project that will come, and so there's a little bit of guesstimate about based on historical trends and developments that are happening. But trying to have that team number of projects. Another thing we've heard is around institutions such as universities or hospitals. Those are two different types of projects as compared to residential projects. So it might be useful to have a community advisory team that's really just focused on those types of projects separately. So those might have a slightly larger geography than the residential projects. Another idea we heard, actually earlier in the workshop earlier this week, was around use types. So would it be helpful to have a community advisory team that goes across uses? So for example, lab projects. That one team sees all of the lab projects across cities since they're not that many. So we're going to make it better. So this is something like, you have thoughts or ideas about what are the ways that this team would work? I'll do a little thing so far.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense on the project stuff. I feel like more about the residential and small projects that would make sense for it to be more community focused because every community is going to have a different need depending on what's going on. That might go into more of the mitigation and other types of things based on the specific community. But it also makes sense like with some of the larger projects in lab space, those might be should maybe be its own kind of communities because those are going to be really very similar across the board versus necessarily. Yeah.
First of all, I think the idea of training is fair. Because I was thinking to myself and also the people I know, you sort of become part of this group, you thrown into it. And there are a lot of competing interests and so I think the training would be really, really appropriate. I like the fact that there would be term. I served on another commission that was a 3-year term. Just, to emphasize your point that there needs to be some continuity as new members come on and next lead with term members. So I think that's a great idea. And I also like the idea of having different focuses in terms of there's the hospital one, and have like this type. I think it's a really good idea. And the thing we're doing right now, I know in the good night analysis we remember on, there was some confusion about whether or not to go on the CAC, the IAG, because the notifications that came from the city were vague. And so tonight you have somebody who got, congratulations, you are Because since everybody can attend all the meetings, which is great, it's nice to know if you're actually part of this group. Just one more thing, I will be my answer, is I think that as opposed to now, the contact information of people who have all these communities ought to be shared with other members of the community. Right now, even though we've asked, in my instance, we've asked for that information to get the names, but the contact information is flagged out. And, you know, especially on school, there's opportunity to meet associations. So I think that would be really shared. As the same
I love the idea of just making all of these things more clear, like, you know, laying out at the front when you're asking someone to consider participating in time. What's the length of time? What's the requirement? And I think if we lay that out, we're more likely to get someone that says, yes, that's what I'm into it. If they know what it is. And I love the idea of training and written responsibilities. And it's very interesting, the idea of the conflict of interest setting. But none of this is, I mean, a lot of this is what we do on other committees or boards. So it's really great to see these ideas for this conference.
Welcome, Marie Collins. Thanks for joining us. We're talking about new effective engagement methods, specifically our proposal for a new community advisory team. I'd love to hear your thing, and then one of the things I want to talk about how we're thinking this community advisory team people. Please jump on that first.
I was just going to quickly ask, how does the community advisory team change, like, engagement with, like, civics associations and neighborhoods? Or is the expectation still going to be the same, where projects should go to the civics association, get community buy-in, go back, or is this community advisory team, the goal is to replace that, or is it going to kind of work hand in hand?
Yeah, I think similar to how IAGs and effective advisory groups work today, there's sort of a parallel track to the way in which developers engage with associations or civic associations. So sort of not touching those pieces of it. But maybe a little bit related, so in terms of how this so today, the impact advisory groups is appointed, or people can self-nominate or elected officials appoint them to be part of this group. One of the things we want to do is broaden and make sure that we have more representative group of folks with many different perspectives and lived experiences. So we are best able to inform the way we develop and should look in their neighborhoods. So our proposal is currently that this is open as wide. We invite people to apply. Neighborhood associations or civic associations can or elected to submit nominations. All those folks can really become a part of a big team of our applicants based on a composition criteria, which we have a survey question about on the video. We'll sort of make sure that folks meet one of those different categories from that perspective. And then we randomly select which of those people are in, so that it's not the city choosing, it's not the local choosing. There's a lottery-based system so that it's more fair. So I'll pause there and see if that does the right way of having people in these groups. Or do we say, does this seem like makes sense? This is something that's still going to work out, so I think that part of it is determined by slight composition criteria. But if you have specific ideas around how many people that's true. They also make the other way to think about the size of projects. Not really yet.
At what point in this process would you do this flow chart? Would you do the conflict of interest for the random selection, or?
Yeah, I think so. In that like application, we would sort of
how kids are just hearing about how Austin Brighton does things is very different than the just Boston News, Dorchester, Lafayette, and so I'm curious in terms of listening sessions, how you go reconcile to put, the difference of like thousands of standards, like what is your vision look like in terms of really hearing the city as a whole and coming to some agreements that make sense for all the communities.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think something that we're still also trying to think through. I mean, as we've been going through, we have more communities and stuff, and we're also receiving input online, where folks are sharing sort of which neighborhood they live in, or what they want to spend time in. I think we're hearing a lot of similarities across neighborhoods as a whole, and I can only speak for Station 1 since I've only staffed Station 1, so I'm curious to hear from my colleagues in other stations, but I think when we do the analysis after these workshops are done, we'll sort of see, like, are there any differences between different locations or different demographic groups? In our earlier rent engagement, it's actually really interesting to see different people's responses based on how long they live in the city of Boston, for example, if they're renting versus homeowner. There's a lot of people have different lived experiences, different responses to different kids. So I think it's definitely great.
The reason why I ask is because I believe that we might need some set of standards across the city, but then I also think that we need characteristics of particular neighborhoods that I think there should be some space to allow that unique voice. Looks like this is something to consider to go through the engagement process.
Thank you so much. Yeah, if you have other ideas of like how we should be thinking about that as a city, or we've heard about
It's actually a great segue. That was in 20 minutes. So if you have any feedback to the station, make sure to put it up on these two poster boards here. And then whenever y'all are ready, we're going to head right over to Station 2 over here.
So yeah, before we go to sleep, we'd love to hear what do you think about this idea? Is the right direction of this? Or should we like no longer before this is like really not close? So 1 through 5 scale, 5 being like yes, start this tomorrow, and 1
everyone to Station 2. We'll give it a moment as everyone gets in, but just to get you oriented on our handout, page 7 corresponds to Station 2, kind of the one page you're talking a little bit. I'll walk through that, and then the corresponding survey page is page 13. So remember, just like Station 1, before you head out, we'd love to get your responses on that survey form and take them back in. Yep. Yep, no, Ian's still filling out. Give me a moment. Kate's talking to council, so I think we might have to do that before we we'll give Ian a chance. Give us one moment just to make sure everybody is able to. Thank you very much, first and foremost, for spending some of your Saturday with us on this. Yeah. I'll get into intros. My name is Mark McGonigal, Deputy Director of Community Engagement at the BPDA. I'm joined by Billy, who's in our Development Review Department, and we're taking notes in 4, also my Development Review Department. And so Station 2 is about early engagement or effective engagement. I overheard this asked in the first one, but I'll ask it again. Those with familiarity of our community, no familiarity. So I heard you say no earlier, right? Little to none, and saw some heads nodding with some familiarity. Okay, so I'll give 2 explanations, but for those that are familiar with Article 8, it's a little easier to explain. When Article 8 was written, however many decades ago, the clock started and still starts effectively, right, officially anyway, at filing. And the developer hands us the big hit files. There's a lot of work that goes in prior to that, but that's when Article 8 truly starts. But over the years, we've learned that there are a lot of effective ways to engage the community before that filing, so much so that we have what we call a pre-file process. And so that can involve, on the neighborhood side, that can involve developers knocking doors with some of others, having an on-site walking tour. We're thinking some future ideas and love to get your responses on maybe some QR codes and things of that nature that are just put on the building to try to, as people are walking by, encourage them to ask some questions or engage. But effective engagement or early engagement in the station is really designed around formalizing those pre-file processes. And so thinking about, for those that are familiar with Article 80, it's thinking a bit of both, right? What are some of those things that you see that happen today that you think, you know what, this is a good practice, we should keep this? Or on the other hand, this is ineffective and I think you ought to scrap this. But then also thinking in a perfect world, what else would we add to this list? Or if you don't have familiarity with Article 80, just thinking of, what type of early engagement would you like to see if the development is coming to your neighborhood? And what are the best ways to reach you in doing it? And then we want to formalize those in a way so we can, and again, we want to hear from you on the best ways to formalize that, but offhand that could be something as simple as a report authored by the developer that lists on this date, we met with, neighbors so-and-so, here were the issues that were discussed, here is how the project was changed in order to address said concern, things of that nature. But we'd love to hear from you as well on the best ways to measure that, right? Part of this station, this conversation will be around how do we best hold not just developers, us, the city, the BPDA, the city's planning department, and developers accountable to those early and effective engagement practices. So just a little bit about why we're doing this, right? When we did our consultant process for this Article 8 reform, we heard from many of the people that we talked to, folks like yourself, if not maybe some of you have contributed to that conversation, but a lot of folks that felt that they experienced barriers to those traditional engagement methods, and the typical meeting format that we post is not the most accessible, and so we wanted to come up with new ideas on how to do that. And again, I think I said all these things, we'll make it required, be led by the developers, but we'll have some part of the process, but that's in some of the things. All right, so let's say this, if there are questions on that or conversations on that, we can just open it up. And if not, we have those questions right on the survey to really kind of really tease some of that information. Yes?
So I love the idea of having some sort of basic standard for the meetings because I know at least some projects I've seen recently, it's like a black box, and all of a sudden you just see like a plan, and then you don't hear anything about the plan after you submit comments for 6 months, and still don't hear anything. It doesn't seem like there's any sort of like level of accountability, whether it's developer or on the BPDA side for community, like reaching back out to the community. So I think that's a great idea. And I think that especially because there's some really great developers that will be very proactive and do that. Then there's others that are a little bit on a different side. So it's like, having some sort of basic standard I think is important. And I do think that, I know that you guys do like hosted meetings and community like feedback and things of that nature, but I think having more of a awareness of where things are in the process, even like after the file, and to have a better understanding or at least something to check in on. I think it's going to be really important. And I especially really like the idea of having developers kind of come talk to the abutters. I think like On the Dog and Foreign Justice does a fantastic job with like community engagement. So there's, they have community events and, are able to share kind of what their visions are and like what does the community need and seeking back like kind of information there. I think that's really important. And even like for the smaller projects, it's better making sure that there's understanding of like what issues might arise for a large building in specific neighborhoods and things like that.
And so that almost gets a little bit to, I think if I'm understanding the question and the comment correctly, a little bit of how much involvement we or the city should have, right? Exactly. We say what, from our perspective, from a planning perspective, et cetera.
And what other community-wise.
Exactly. Okay. Yep. Exactly. So that back and forth. Exactly. Okay. Very good. Thank you. And one other reaction to that is, obviously these different stations, there's going to be correlations, but you're going to run out, the different check-ins, the different points in the review process, kind of making sure that community members that are engaging are aware of what the changes are. That'll be spoken to a little bit on Station 4, very good comment, but I just want to throw that in there as well. As you get to Station 4, that's there. We also took some notes on the other things. Anyone else? Kate?
Love the idea of having
Oh, yeah.
They have to have it would be really great. She said, okay, this is here, and I have a phone number to call, and I can go right to the website. Because that's what it's really hard to figure out the means of address or something. Sometimes it doesn't really make sense because you're looking at the street.
And that's one we've heard a lot of positive feedback, so that's one to add to, and definitely want to hear from everyone. Just a reminder, if you think that is a good idea, write that down on the option, the QR code, because we have heard that sign on the project itself. Any other thoughts, questions? If not, I would say we can just jump right into some of these survey questions. For instance, like this is something I'm always interested in because we do traditionally, right, the ways that we will automatically reach out is email blasts. We'll put ads in the local newspapers. So here in Southie, that's the South Boston Today, the South Boston Online, Cotton Southie, South Boston Beat, right behind you. So we do those. We also have a Twitter page and a Facebook page, things of that nature. But we often hear from folks that when we get to meetings, I just heard about this, so really do want to hear from folks. What are the best ways for you? Like for instance, we haven't historically done text messaging, but we hear from folks that might be a good way to do it. I'm seeing some maybe not so much, but please take some time, or if you want to talk about those, what are the best ways to reach you? Again, thinking of these, you can think of that in all aspects of engagement, particularly for the engagement side. Yes? Yep. Yep. Good question. The question was, pre-COVID, all of our engagements were in person in locations like this. Post-COVID, during the middle of COVID, everything was virtual. And now that we're post-COVID, we still have some virtual and some in person. And so the answer to that is what we found during the all virtual engagements was that there are benefits to both, and we found that, so let me just answer your question bluntly. We will be sticking with a hybrid approach going forward. For instance, just to put it in easier terms, like our development review meetings, this is a planning meeting, that's a little bit in the middle, I guess. It's Article 80 review, but we're reforming Article 80, so it's a workshop style. It lends itself better to in person. For our Article 80 meetings, a lot of it is developer presenting, getting questions and comments back. That lends itself very well to a virtual engagement. So we will be keeping that where it makes sense, and in areas where, and this is an example of one, where the format really doesn't lend itself as well to online, that we'll do in person. But we've done it, it's no longer because of the pandemic, it's simply because constituents have told us the benefits of virtual, they want to keep it. Oh, yeah. Loud and clear too. It's been overwhelming. It's not even close. Yep. Yes. Well, I'm not even making a value judgment myself. I'm saying that overwhelmingly we hear from people that they would much, much prefer to keep it virtual. Yes. Some people are arguing that they would prefer, but I would say, I don't think it's exaggerated to say 80% say that they would prefer to keep it virtual. I'll give you the best example. A lot of civic associations went virtual only during the pandemic and then brought it back, and then their constituencies were like, just do it virtual, please. And then they stopped doing it in person altogether. Yeah, no, we don't use any of that for our virtual meetings. Yeah, we don't use any of that for virtual meetings. But yeah, no, that's a good point. But if you want to, focus on just kind of our policies going forward on the engagement stuff, I'm happy to continue that even after this discussion here. Yep.
So I just have a question. I noticed in the reads that have been going on so far, the chat has been turned on.
The chat, yeah.
Can you explain why that?
I don't know if that's necessarily, well, real quick, I don't know for sure exactly. I guess some meetings we have that and some meetings that we don't, but I can't, I'm going to say I'll have to look and find out.
Last several ones I've been to, especially on the certain channels.
Yes.
That has been turned off.
That's true.
And it's a way of, again, being able to communicate, having that chat.
Yep. Okay.
So I definitely vote in favor of increased engagement and communication rather than limiting.
Thank you.
And Mark, we got about 5 minutes at this station.
5 more minutes. Thank you, Dylan. Yep.
I would say an alternative way to that, and when chat is on, and makes it accessible for people to put their questions in the chat, because some people are afraid, like to want it.
Yep.
And when there's a recording of that meeting, there isn't necessarily a place to see all the chat. And a lot of times there is a lot of really good questions in the chat, and that's sort of lost. So.
Fair points. But as Dylan just reminded us, we only have a few more minutes at this station, so I just want to refocus folks back to those. If you've already filled these out. Oh, Representative, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mark. Thanks everyone for being here for your feedback. Just a quick question. When we're talking engagement in Article 80, does this discussion cover all Article 80? Because we have large projects, small project review, so you can just clarify that.
Yes. Very good question. Thank you, Representative Beal. So yes, all of this Article 80 reform that we're talking about will include, will have recommendations for changes for both large project and small project. Some are particular, like the last station you were at, IAGs versus the potential for future CATs, that is applicable only to large projects. But all the other stations will have implications for both small and large projects.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So it seems like I'm hearing the project sidewalks. So is BPA also doing project sidewalks for doing small projects? PPA, so it could be like 7 parcels, 5 stories.
Well, that could be a suggestion. I mean, I think we're looking for feedback on that. I mean, my initial gut reaction is I would think large projects, yes. I mean, I could think of certain small projects that might not be necessary, but I don't want to necessarily make that determination. I think that's more of a question. You know, if you want to put that in, what you know, if you think there should be a distinction there, let us know.
Yeah, I think it depends on the project, and like if there is concerns from neighbors or anything, I think it makes sense because I think without physically going to locations, it's hard to visualize where there could be an issue.
I think a lot of that would depend on where it is too. Like for instance, even if it's a small project, but it's tucked inside of an existing residential neighborhood, I think most folks are going to say, I want a site walk. But if it's a small project, say, you know, like the Erie Core Investments did, and there's not any direct butters, you know, you might not get much interest, you know, that sort of thing. Yeah. All right, so just want to again remind everyone, if you haven't already, please fill those. And also, as was mentioned the last time, if you so desire, wouldn't mind just a general, again, this doesn't mean that, you know, we're going to take it and run with it, but general idea of what you thought of this idea. Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think we should continue to pursue some of these early engagement methods? A simple scale of 1 to 5. And then questions that we did not answer today, please jot those down as well. And make sure, and we'll take your survey questionnaires before you go. Oh yeah, no, we'll take it. We can just tear them out. Yep. Yeah, no, we'll figure it. You are. Thank you very much.
When you turn your survey in, feel free to grab a snack, come back over, meet me and my friends here at Station 3. This is for Station 3.
Thank you.
100% safe. What do you think? Cookies, wraps, water.
Thank you very much. Happy to get some really good points and questions on the Virgin. It does. It's something that comes up a lot, so it's still a question that I ask all the time. You can just tear it up.
You know what? Maybe conversation.
Oh, we can take one. Oh no? Yeah, okay. Yep.
Well, yeah.
There are some areas I should be. And I would guess that was
friends and colleagues, and so it's going to make sure that we capture known style. So welcome to mitigation and integrity methods table. By show of hands, who here knows what the definition of mitigation and integrity methods is? Okay. I would also keep my hand here because there is no defined definition yet. One of the things that we hope to do in the Article 80 review process is make sure that we put some definitions and parameters on what we all mean when we're saying community benefits, mitigation, and enabling infrastructure. have for today is making sure that one, these definitions you think are the right definitions, and then sort of starting to dig into what are sort of, from your perspective, what are the most important community benefits, some of the most important mitigation asks that you as a community member or constituent have. So, any questions so far? I have 4 probing questions that I'd love to get your responses to, if there are no clarifying questions. All right, hearing and seeing none. I'm going to say, first question, what kinds of community benefits are most important to you guys? So the second page here has sort of the buckets of community benefits that we're talking about, right? There's the menu of options, you see it on your page. Those are the kind of buckets that we're thinking about in terms of community benefits right now. In your neighborhood, when a development is proposed, what are some of the things that you're thinking about from a community benefits perspective? How can a developer improve public goods or services in your neighborhood?
But not only public goods or services, certainly making sure that everybody has ample green space.
Ample green space, sure, yeah.
You know,
yeah, tree canopy covered, very they would like that particular neighborhood. Yeah.
When that's planting more trees, maybe it's something like that. But I think the whole thing about community benefits to me is a quality of life issue.
Okay.
And whenever that meets that neighborhood, I think the developers, I don't know how you can do that, but in my experience, some developments, the developers say, yeah, and then they just watch away when it comes to eyes and say, well, where is that? You told us to do the project, you want the trees. They're on the state, that's logic, but
I think you bring up a really good point, right? Compliance is also something that we're trying to work on as an agency. Setting these clear parameters is a path towards understanding if somebody's complying with something. So that's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
I wanted to follow on that idea of even if we had a standard and it said, stated, what is the use of the bathroom? It's going to check on if that agency or that does not exist, then all that has to come forward is not and to another thing that I've heard a lot of people say in different projects is mitigation decisions about the benefits and implications of development. So, well, I'll do, for example, there might be one project implementation in South Boston, which is very, very concerning. I think $10,000 there are offset from the people who live really close.
So maybe something important for us to consider is proximity of impact. Great. Any other? No, additive. So the existing sort of mitigation categories that you see there, IDP, linkage, jobs, and housing, those are things that will remain part of the menu of options. No, there's no set value right now for a lot of things, for IDP mitigation at all, right? So those will stay. Yeah. So right now, right, like, that's a good clarification, and I'm sorry, I can't read your name back. That's a good clarification, Caitlin. Right now, there are things like IDP, like linkage that are default on a project-by-project basis. Other added credit, community benefits, and mitigation are always part of the community process and improvement process. But there's no guardrails on those things. What we're trying to do, much like IDP, is set clearer boundaries and clearer sets of parameters.
I can understand the community benefit categories except for maybe getting a little clarity.
Please. Yeah. So, I mean, I think a lot of times what we see is a conversation with community members that say we want to make sure that businesses aren't displaced. We want to make sure that there's space for new small businesses to come into our neighborhood. And this is an attempt to try to sort of codify that thinking. What exactly that looks like, I'm not totally sure, to be honest with you, right? I think it could mean things like a fund for small business grant support. It could mean things like making sure that we're right-sizing retail space in development. But maybe there needs to be a little bit more clarity, and this is a good point for why we're getting this feedback. Maybe there needs to be more clarity on what we mean by small business support. Ebony, have you heard anything about like the specifics of what small business support might be?
No, but as a PM, I often hear, if, let's say, a developer is proposing retail space, they're always suggesting, well, we know the small business owner would love to rent out the space, so just prioritizing and making sure that that space goes to a local small business owner. Oh, that's okay. That is something that I often hear.
Great. Yeah, Ann.
I have another question unless somebody else wants to ask a question. And I'm not sure this is where it fits, but it's been my experience that in some of these developments, the right players in terms of city agencies or state agencies are not at the table. For example, there's a development across the street from where I live.
Okay.
Part of the land is owned by Master. They have never been. Well, they have been. But, you know, one person comes from Massport, but we don't get any information from Massport. Or there's no one there from Boston Water and Sewer. There's no one there from Boston Traffic.
Yeah.
All these agencies that have a huge impact on what it's going to be like to live around these developments, I think need to be at the table.
I think in a lot of ways there's formal processes that try to do that now, but we're trying to improve that because we have as staff the same frustration about not getting the right answer or consistent answer from our partner agencies. So that's good to reinforce and hear, and I'll make sure that we note that in our notes because I agree it's an issue. I do have another sort of question on community benefits mitigation. When proposals come to your neighborhoods, right, when you're in conversations with developers, with your fellow community members about mitigation, about community benefits, what information can we collectively use to decide which community benefits should be prioritized? Any thoughts on that?
Seems to me this might go back to table number 1.
Okay. In which ways?
Well, whether you have an IAG or whatever they're being called now, it seems to me that's one place where that discussion could happen.
Okay.
Because you've got people you've got neighborhood people, you've got business owners, you've got community organizers, you've got neighborhood people, you've got a whole bunch of people on these teams.
Yep.
And it seems to me that they're the ones who know what kind of community benefits.
Are there things that we would need from the developer to better inform that conversation?
Well, for me, it's just a matter of the developers. I want to be careful here. Being willing to actively listen to suggestions and not just have it seen as some kind of noise that if they just hang out long enough in the process, they're going to outlast the noise and nothing's going to get done.
So maybe we as regulators, right, maybe we need to catalog feedback in a different way, in a more sort of comprehensive way.
Yeah, but I think it's important for people to coming to, whether it's this meeting or any other meeting, to feel like they're heard and that suggestions are going to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And it's not just, you're just not being qualified. And it's sort of what it is.
It's a really good question of how we identify what the benefits should be or prioritize. I don't have the answer, but I'm glad that there was a recognition on how it's being done now. It's super ad hoc. Very clearly, conversations are happening one-on-one behind the scenes. I know. And I'm thinking about the example that one of the IAGs we're working on, where, even IAG itself, and say, these are all the things that we need as benefits. And then the next presentation by the developer will be like, we're going to support this, little, wait, but you know that the conversation has been had in between them.
Yeah. I mean, somebody brought up proximity, right? Proximity of impact by the development. Dylan, how are we on time?
Yeah, just doing time check. We have 5 minutes, so if we do want to start looking at those survey questions, making sure we're filling everything out.
Yeah, thank you. Before we do that, one thing I'm wondering is how do we balance sort of these conversations about community benefits that we know are sort of city-wide needs versus hyper-local benefits? Do you guys have any reaction to that?
Well, I was just going to ask the question, how do you think that community benefits thinking relates to overall city zoning?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the actual zoning, right, like Article 80, these changes that we're proposing for the Article 80 process will be codified through a rewriting of Article 80, which is the city zone, right? So,
because in some ways, I know it's the rubber meets the road, but doing community benefits on a project-by-project basis kind of doesn't really make sense.
Yeah.
You need a global view of what the community needs.
Yeah, so global view of community benefits.
Well, if the city itself has, 10 priorities, if urban, canopy is one of them, then, I don't know, you cascade down, then local of how can we get these goals from the communities project.
Now, this is going to be a hard thing to do a yes or no for, but I'm just sort of jazzing here. Should citywide needs be the top priority, or should a local need be the top priority when we're talking community benefits?
Well, there's 3 levels, right? There's project level too.
Yep.
So to me, it feels more like the community is the local community, or sort of in between.
So yeah, citywide, sort of neighborhood, community, then project adjacent. Should be the primary. Okay.
I also think it depends on the project too, right?
Yeah.
Because if we're talking about a small project, it makes more sense for it to be more neighborhood focused. But if you're talking about, again, like an on-the-dot or lab space or something, that should be a little bit more broad.
That's really interesting. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think, issues like housing, that's a citywide issue.
Yep.
And depending on the size of the project, things like that should affect it.
Yeah.
Particularly for setting standards for mitigation, I think that looking at it from project size and level should also be in place. So you might arrive to more trees and things of that nature for a small project versus again, the expectations for on the dot should be more because you're essentially building a new community. How do you add grocery stores or pharmacies or things of that nature that fit the local community?
Yeah, sure. So maybe it's not just about sort of how we're defining mitigation and community benefits and what sort of formula, but it's also what scale at which does that formula apply? Is it the city, the local project scale? That's really helpful. Because Dylan did an excellent job of helping remind us that we have a little bit of a time constraint. I want to point everybody to the survey in the back, right? So take a little time to do the survey for 3. I'm going to read you 3 questions. And think of it this while you're responding to it. And you can also write any post-its over the course of the next hour while you're here, right? How do you feel about the definitions that are in this booklet? Are we missing anything? Are there impacts of the project that we're not talking about that should be considered mitigation? And then finally, do we make sure the community benefit conversations are localized and shaped by community planning efforts? So think about those things. I'm happy to repeat anything, but I want to give you space to think. And thank you everybody for your conversations.
I can collect your surveys and speak them.
I'm sorry, so what's the specific issue that we've encountered?
Well, it's all down
Alrighty, folks, over to rushing in to start time checks. Whenever you are finished with your survey, if you want to make your way over to station 4, we'll start out. Thank y'all.
Yeah, I think I might need
I don't have time to say for station 4, but I will say that.
Yeah.
Or more engagement.
Awesome. Thank you.
Just how you doing?
Thank you very much. Most of the time, outside of sort of the development
That's with sides.
All right, we have a couple of stragglers. Everyone here?
Yeah, you got it. One more.
One more.
Yeah, I think. Maybe two. Two.
Yeah, I think I'll bring some rope. All right, station 4. We made it so far. Congratulations. Thanks for sticking around. So this, as you've been through 1 through 3, you probably know also how we're changing, proposing to change community engagement practices, standardize some communication. 4 is all about how it all comes together into ideas for a new process, right? What does the end-to-end look like? What does every step look like along the way? So I'm talking a little bit about that. We are looking at the content on page 10 in your handouts. The corresponding survey that goes along with it is on page 17. I like to just kind of tear it out and have it ready on the side so I can fill it out as we go. But totally up to you. So the ideas in your packet related to this kind of coordinated review all come from the feedback we've received since the beginning of the process. That Article 80 is just, it's too complicated, right? It's too long, it's too complicated. The clock only starts when the PNF is filed, but by the time that file comes in, the project's almost baked, right? The developer has already spent time and resources and made decisions about things like height, about whether it's housing or lab, how many units, whether it's working or not working. And by the time the clock starts and we start to roll out some of these public meetings, it's almost like what's even the point, right? You go out there with a project that's fully baked and people don't really feel like their voice has a chance to shape the project as well. So this idea, along with a lot of others you've heard about today, is aimed at getting to the root of that problem. And I think a good way to describe describe this to Jay, think about it as sort of taking what is a PNF and breaking it up into smaller, more bite-sized pieces, right? Instead of having sort of what is, sometimes a 100, 200, even 500-page document containing all of the information about a project, from really simple things like use and density and height to very complicated things like transportation analysis, wind analysis, right? What we want to do is break down these filings so that a lot of those kind of gating decisions, as we call them, right? Is it a lab or is it housing? Is it 5-story stall or is it 10-story stall? Are all in a more kind of digestible conceptual design filing. That is step number 2, right? So what we want to do is make sure, one of the good things about pre-file today is developers themselves go out and do a lot of early engagement. If you're a good developer, you get a precursor civic association supporters to go in the, local startup shop and talk to people where they are, right? And so we want to create space for people like that. Today, pre-file isn't really a process that is defined in the code. It's something that's going to evolve as a matter of practice, right? So what we want to do first and foremost is kind of name that and say there's value in having those early conversations. Go out to the people that can make contact when you're beginning to think about a project before you have all of your ideas figured out, right? That's really what sort of the top left box here represents, right? Some of the things that would be included in that filing would be things like the existing condition on site. So for example, you're a developer, you're thinking about doing something with the parking lot. You have to sort of describe in the initial filing to us what is on site today, right? It probably says something like, it's a parking lot. This is the zoning for the site today. These are some of the existing, businesses that are adjacent to the site, right? This is what else is around it. There's housing development, there's an body shop, etc. So that first filing there, which is now we're calling a new project request, right, instead of a pre-file, has information about the existing conditions so that it signals to us that there is an intent to do something with the parcel of land. It signals the same thing to the community. If you look at the right side of this chart, what's happening in the community engagement bucket at that same time is the developer is going out there to do things like go to the civic association, maybe they're putting up a sign on that lot that says, hey, there's something coming here. If you want to learn more about it, here's a QR code. This is a number you can call. This is the person of the EPDA who you should reach out. Right? So it's kind of signaling through the neighborhood that there is intent to develop. The second step, or I guess what step 1 here, would then be the concept design phase, right? This is going back to those gating conditions related to a development and decisions about what to build. Whether it's a lab or housing, how tall it is, how many parking spaces. All of that information is really what kind of gets figured out together when you're trying to build out your performance on the developer side, right? Before going into the weeds on the specific impact analysis. Any changes you make to one of those things has a ripple effect on the entire project, right? So for example, if you're doing a lab, you can probably pay a lot more toward mitigation. If you're doing housing, you may or may not need, you might have a different market ratio, right? So all of the things within that kind of concept phase fit together and decisions about what impact level. However, it is still very much at a conceptual level, right? Which means that as a member of the community, when you kind of weigh in at that point and say, well, I don't want this to be a lab, I'd like to be housing, there's actually an opportunity for the developer to make that change, right? Because they haven't yet invested all the design dollars, they haven't yet used the consultants, etc. So the second, that would be what is kind of the step 1 concept phase filing, the EPDA. What's happening around that time in the community engagement column here to the right would be the developers who make it more specific surveys, right? Now that that intent to develop has already been sent to the neighborhood, they are maybe doing detailed surveys about sort of the type of housing, right? Should you want to be renting, you want to be home ownership, and getting kind of more specific feedback related to the project itself. This is also the time where the project might be presented to the community advisory team, which you heard about it, right? This is a group of people that are coming together on a regular basis to review multiple projects in their neighborhood. And so at this stage is when the project might be brought to that group to say, here's another project that's doing X, Y, and Z. And then the group would be able to give us and the community the input to say, okay, that's great, they want to do X. There's a number of other projects in the area that are doing something similar. This is what we've seen work on project X. This is what we've seen work on project Y. And so they can draw kind of from their shared knowledge of the neighborhood who get information from the developer that's relevant at that stage. There might also helps again BPDA's kind of technical staff to understand how it shapes it as it goes through additional stages of review. And so this is again another opportunity to collect very detailed and specific feedback about the project through a lot of methods that you heard about in Station 2, right? Whether it be surveys, public meetings, maybe it goes back to the community advisory team for a second time. This would also be the moment where project mitigation is figured out, right? So now that we know what the project is and what its specific impacts are, let's start to talk about the scale of the mitigation package and sort of how it wants to be distributed and what those dollars want to be used for, right? And then finally, as it does today, post-schematic design phase, the project will appear before the community board, and we'll probably have a public hearing where members of the community will have an additional opportunity to weigh in, after which it will go through design development and detail design and other stuff. So that's kind of the proposal here. Just to sum it up again, the goal is to take what is a very detailed, complex finding, break it up into more bite-sized pieces, and make sure that the decisions that are being made by the staff, by the agency, are reflective of the input that is being received from the community, right? And so that we're moving kind of one step forward, and not one step forward, two steps back, as it feels like. So I'm going to pause there. Happy to open it up to any questions or comments from you. And I do want to point everyone to the survey. The 3 or 4 specific questions we have are, when you think about development projects in your neighborhood, what part of the project do you care most about? Is it high density mitigation? It could be all of those things. We want you to tell us that. Survey question 1. Survey question 2 is, what is the best way for us to show you how your neighborhood has helped to shape the project, right? Right now there's no feedback loop. We want the ability to create that. And so we want to hear from you, kind of, how can we validate it? And how do we make sure that you know what happened in your comment and comment form, or what happened to your Three is, how do you want to learn about the project, right? What are the different methods that we can use to reach you? Text, call, and then 4, when the BPDA has policy priorities or is making decisions about things like, let's say, parking, how do you want to learn about them through the development of the process, right? So, for example, you want staff to begin every meeting by saying, here's the BPDA's policy on parking. This is what the developers are proposing. Or other ways that we can sort of keep the community informed about what the city's thinking in some of these parameters. So again, of course, they're happy to open it up, feel free to jump right in, or take some time to fill out your surveys. And
I think this is a great idea. But I love the fact that the design possibly might be changed so that you get more adjustable. Recently, we got information from a developer that was over 200 pages long. And people who are experts in different parts of that development understand completely what all those charts and graphs and everything else talk about. But for those of us who aren't, it's almost overwhelming the amount of information that's thrown at you. And just to follow up on that, I also think that in terms of the information that developers give you, you need some time to be able to digest it. Like in this most recent development, we've been working with different meetings every single week on the same night of the week. So if that night is inconvenient for you, you don't go. But it's a lot of information that you're expected to digest in a short period of time and then come back with some feedback. So I like the idea of smaller bits and pieces that are easy to digest. And so
that's great, thank you.
Yeah, I would say a lot of what I heard today feels like you're trying to improve the first feedback, which I think is really important because by the time all this information and the endpoint hits you, it's like you're in the middle of it. It would be great to get a lot of input early on. But I also think that there's almost another step after all this, which is what happens as the project is being developed. More of a communication feedback, which could also tie into compliance with some of the community benefit things often are just sort of wrong.
And Greg, when you're saying that, I'm just curious, is there a particular project or example you're thinking of?
Not really. No, I mean, I've heard it just so many times.
Does the website get kept up to date so that it continues to be a place to check in rather than just end at a certain point?
Yeah, and sometimes, I mean, just hearing there's no updates is a good enough update, right? And maybe we can even do that. Because we don't often control when a developer gets their financing or whether we do it all. But we can tell you what we know, that is, there's no change. Maybe we just kind of continue to say that more proactively.
Yeah, that's a really good idea, because these developments take years.
Yeah.
And so you get really excited about one days of it, and then all of a sudden there's this pause that's actually more than a pause, but it feels like a lifetime. So,
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Yeah.
I have two questions. The first one, is there any idea of how long each phase would be? Like, is it they need to keep it open for comment for X amount of time, or is the developer like fast-paced to do this?
That's a great question. So we do have periods today, as you know, for each filing. What we see is the filings themselves have become so complicated, right? There are hundreds of pages, as I was saying. The comment periods haven't really adjusted to reflect the complexity of the filings. So PNF comes in, it has, let's say, a 45-day comment period. It's really impossible even for kind of technical staff to go through it, let alone members of the community. So the first thing we want to do is adjust those comment periods, right? Second thing we want to do is enforce them on both sides, right? Because only when you get sort of a consolidated set of comments is it helpful for us to package it, go back to the developer and say, okay, now you've got to work on sort of turning around those edits, right? It's kind of a continuous stream of feedback. It becomes very hard to know when to go back to the drawing board. So to more directly answer your question, as for reviewing comment periods, we're working out exactly what those are. They will probably be, around 60 days, maybe 75 days for each one of these filings, and then we'll make sure at the end of the comment period to really respect that end date, so that we can be respectful of the community's time and involvement, but also, give the developer some predictability, right, around when to expect that feedback. I'm sorry, she had another question. Let's just get to that.
Yeah. Just on a time check, we have about 5 minutes left, so we should move to some survey questions.
Thank you.
It's just a related question where it says like advisory team held first meeting public workshop 1. Is that literally like nobody's one meeting and one public workshop, or is that like there'll be a public workshop on a Thursday night and a Saturday?
Yeah, that's, we certainly hadn't been thinking about it like that, but that's a great suggestion, right? Again, we want to make sure there's just one public workshop. Maybe we can do it on multiple nights with the same content. So if you can't go on Thursday, you can probably go on Saturday, something like that. We've also been hearing about opportunities for in-person and virtual, right? So we definitely want to incorporate more ways to hear from a bigger number of people, even if it means repeating the same content in multiple different formats. And
what happens to the comments that we give to developers?
great question. So today what happens is they are included in, we issue a scoping determination at the end of the PNF comment period. The comments received from the community end up in a packet that goes to the developer. When they submit their following filing, which is often a PPRR, they are required to submit sort of an inline response to each of the letters that have been received from the community, right? Whether to say, okay, great comment, it's included in the PPIR, or it's included with some revisions, or we can't do it and just.
So this communication is between the developer and BPDA?
It's with the developer, the BPDA, and then it's issued as a public filing.
So those of us who get the comments, we never know what happens to our comments.
You absolutely do. So the developer's response is included in the BPIR, which is the next filing. But it sounds like that doesn't work today, right? Is that what I'm hearing? Right. And so if we were to do it right, what would that look like? How would you like us in this new process to incorporate that kind of a response?
There's got to be some kind of mechanism where, at a minimum, you would get a response saying, thank you for your concerns. Even that doesn't exist. And then, just to acknowledge the fact that most of the comments and concerns, I think, are probably coming from a very thoughtful and earnest place. People live in these neighborhoods. They live close to the street. They live next door. And they put a lot of time and energy into making an effort to make a comment.
Yes, absolutely.
And it oftentimes feels like it's not value. How that would happen, other than a standard, thank you for your response, kind of response, which is a very nice response, I don't think so.
Right. It sounds like you wanted to be bold, right? At the very least, there should be a yes, your funding was received. Here's what's going to happen with it, right? And then when a decision is made that has to do with your feedback, you want to know what that decision is.
And the same thing happens to the BBDA. No, I sent emails and I never get responses. Don't even say anything for me.
Yeah.
So it works for both. It works for full rest.
I think we definitely want to do better. It's not the intent because we understand how much time and effort goes into participating in these processes, right? You all spend a lot of your time doing that, and I think we should definitely be doing more, not just to acknowledge, but also to truly respond to your comments. So we're taking this down and we think this will go on. Anyone else have thoughts or questions about Station 4? I see folks are filling out their surveys. That's excellent. We have a couple more minutes, as Dylan just pointed out. So, unless there's more questions, comments, we'll go ahead.
So, this comment will be meant to be a Debbie Downer. It's meant to allow the community to understand the part of the plan goes through as is, what that means to the community. So, if the zoning goes through, what that's going to mean is that the community will no longer have a voice. And this is citywide.
Can you clarify which new zoning?
Article 81. So we're talking about, right? So we're talking about?
Yes, we don't have zoning.
Okay. If the text amendment or however you want to alter it goes through, it's really cool. If it goes through, the community loses its voice because the zoning becomes as of right, or changes become as of right. Same thing with the PDA. Number one. Number two, if we lose our voice, the community loses its ability to sue the city because it's as of right. So anything, whether it be an ADU, whether it be this, the PDA, anytime the PDA changes its zoning, and things become as of right, there is no longer a community voice, and there is no longer an action item, such as being able to sue. So just something to think about, as you're all thinking of your surveys, or whatever you feel, it's just important that people know.
Do you mind if I jump in and clarify a couple of things? Yeah, no, and I just want to make sure that, we're having a transparent conversation and folks in the neighborhood sort of are aware of what will change, right? So a couple of things. All of the proposals that you've heard today are to reform a process, not to reform the zoning, right? So we're talking about the rules of the road and not what buildings should look like. That's something that our planning team is doing. That's something that Joe was just at this morning at a Squares and Streets meeting, right?
Well, so there's a few things that we're collectively working on as an agency, and it's hard to keep trace of that. There are land use changes that are being proposed in terms of land use zoning changes, right? So Article ADUs and then Squares and Streets zoning to enable things to be more as-of-right development, like you're saying. I think it's important to remember, though, that if it hits the square footage threshold of an Article 80 project, it will still be required to go through this process, even if it complies with a number of those other factors. Right?
That's exactly right. So in theory, in the future, if there were to be a new zoning through Squares and Streets, a project that is more than 20,000 square feet would still go through small project review. And a project that's over 50,000 square feet would still go through large project review. And what we're talking about today is not changing those thresholds or not specifically what is the zoning envelope, but when these projects do go through additional process and review with the BPDA through Article 80, what should that process look like, right? What are the ways in which we want to continue to make sure that the community has a voice in shaping development decisions? The different ways in which we think about mitigation and community benefits. How do we continue to not only gather but to amplify the community's voice through a lot of ideas that you heard at Station, right? How do we provide training and staffing and resources to, and like potentially, stipends to members of the community that volunteer to be on groups like the CAT, right? So I actually think, and I don't mean to sort of disagree with you, but I do think the intent here is really to strengthen the voice of the community in this new process, and not to take it away. And you're totally you're entitled to kind of think about it the way that you do and have your own opinion. I just do think it's important to kind of Joe's points to like separate and really clarify, right? This is about how we improve the process and not how we think about land use and site planning. But these are really kind of separate tracks that will work together.
And I think by improving this process, it's being improved to developers' advantage, not communities. Because if you look at all these different projects that are going on in the city, the waste.
And I would love to hear, Luann, from you through a lot of the surveys, right? How do we make sure that doesn't happen? That's something that's important to us, it's important to the project team, and it's important to the agency. If you have specific ideas, you gave me two really good ones today. One of them was continue to have virtual and in-person meetings. The other one was do the same meeting on multiple nights in the neighborhood. So if you can't make it on a weekend, you can do it on a weeknight. That's exactly the kind of feedback we want, because now's the moment to tell us how to fix it, right? We always raise broken, tell us how we want to fix it.
Right, and I and my group will be focusing on community input, steady, increasing, and what does that look like? And what does that look like?
That is great. That's exactly what we want to do.
Just be aware, my radar is looking at the community feedback on all small project or large project areas versus of the landscape type zone, which is also is eventually going to lead to a zone change. But we have my heart full of we want to keep it through multiple administrations.
Yeah, and we appreciate, you spend so much time doing this stuff. So I just, and I've said this to you before, I really appreciate you showing up, making sure we're staying on our feet, keeping us in check. So please keep doing that.
And I'm just asking that you listen and hear the community.
Absolutely. All right, any closing comments, final thoughts?
Are we turning our survey and I'm happy to collect them?
As with all of the stations, you have stickies in front of you. If there was anything we didn't get to today, please put it on a sticky on your way out. Please also tell us what you think of this idea from 1 to 5. 1 is don't do it at all. 5 is sounds great, keep going. We'd love to hear